You know, I remember that day like it was yesterday, the kind of day where everything just feels off, like the world's conspiring against you, and you're left wondering if anyone's even listening up there. I'd been praying for months, begging for a break in this endless rut, feeling like my life was stuck in neutral while everyone else zoomed past, and honestly, it hit me hard enough to make me question if God had forgotten my address altogether. But looking back now, man, that delay wasn't some cruel jokey, it was the setup for something that flipped my whole world upside down in the best way possible. Let me take you back to how it all started. My name's Alex, and I live in this quiet little suburb outside of Austin, Texas. Think picket fences, neighborhood barbecues, but with that underlying tension you get in any close-knit community, where folks smile to your face but whisper behind your back. I'd moved there 5 years ago after losing my job in the city, scraping by on freelance gigs, and yeah, I was the guy always fixing up my old ranch-style house, trying to make it feel like home. But the real trouble kicked in with the HOA, Homeowners Association, those self-appointed kings of the cul-de-sac who think they own your soul along with your lawn. The president, this guy named Harlan, was a real piece of work, retired accountant, power-hungry type who'd nitpick every blade of grass out of place, all because he had some grudge from way back. Turns out, my property line overlapped what he claimed was community land from an old survey mix-up, and he saw me as the outsider threatening his little empire. It started small, you know? A notice in the mail about my fence being 2 inches too high, Harlan showing up at my door with that smug grin, saying, "Alex, we're all in this together, but rules are rules, fix it or face the fines." I'd nod, bite my tongue, but inside, it burned. I was barely making ends meet, pouring every spare dime into that house as a fresh start after my divorce, and here he was, wielding his clipboard like a weapon. I'd pray about it at night, alone in my living room with the Bible open. God, why this hassle? Why now, when I'm just trying to rebuild? But weeks turned to months, no relief. Fines piled up, neighbors started side-eyeing me like I was the problem, whispering at block parties about that guy who doesn't play by the rules. I felt isolated, forgotten, like my prayers were echoing in an empty room. Harlan escalated it, calling a meeting where he stood up, pointing at a map, declaring, "This encroachment is a threat to our values, Alex. If you can't comply, maybe this isn't the place for you." The room murmured agreement, and I sat there, fists clenched, thinking, is this it? Am I really going to lose everything over some petty power trip? The weight of it all crushed me. Sleepless nights staring at the ceiling, doubting if faith even mattered when life kept kicking you down. I'd think about folks in the Bible, like that story of Daniel praying and waiting weeks for an answer, or Joseph rotting in prison for years before his big break, and I'd wonder if my delays were some kind of test or worse, punishment for past mistakes. Harlan wasn't just a neighbor. He became this symbol of everything going wrong, his mousy wife Evelyn egging him on with snide comments like, "Some people just don't appreciate structure," thrown my way at the mailbox. The conflict dug deep. It wasn't just about land. It was his jealousy over my independence, me not bowing to his control, and my own resentment bubbling up from feeling like an underdog in a town that favored the old guard. I'd vent to my buddy Mike over coffee, who was the laid-back mechanic down the street, always saying, "Alex, hang in there. Karma's got a funny way of circling back," but even he couldn't see how close I was to breaking, ready to sell the house and bail. Then came the turning point, that unexpected twist that hit like a bolt from the blue, and trust me, it wasn't anything I could have planned. One rainy afternoon, I was digging through old property records in my attic, frustrated as hell, when I stumbled on this faded document from the 70SA survey showing the land dispute wasn't my fault. It was Harlan's predecessor who'd fudged the lines to grab extra space for the community park, probably for some kickback. My heart raced. This was ammo, real proof that flipped the script. But instead of rushing to confront him, I paused. Something inside whispered to wait, pray it through, like those silent seasons were building me up for this. I shared it with Mike, who laughed and said, "Dude, this is gold. Harlan's gonna eat crow." We strategized over beers, deciding to present it at the next HOA meeting, but with a twist. I'd invite the whole neighborhood, make it public, turn his weapon against him. The buildup was tense. Harlan caught wind somehow, cornered me in the driveway one evening, his face red, snarling, "You think digging up dirt changes anything? I've run this place for years. You're just a transient." I stood my ground, calm for the first time, replying, Harlan, it's not about me versus you, it's about what's right. And maybe it's time we all saw the full picture. His eyes narrowed, a mix of fury and fear, but he backed off, muttering threats about lawyers. Inside, I was shaking, but that delay, all those months of waiting, had toughened me, taught me patience, sharpened my resolve, like faith wasn't just words but a muscle I'd been flexing in the dark. Mike slapped my back later, grinning. This is your moment. Mango, get him. The meeting night arrived, packed hall under those harsh fluorescent lights, neighbors shifting uncomfortably as Harlan opened with his usual bluster. We've got standards to uphold, and certain individuals, but I stood up, document in hand, voice steady. Hold on, Harlan, let's talk facts. I laid it out, projecting the old survey on the wall, explaining how the lines were manipulated decades ago, how his community land was actually mine by right. Gasps rippled through the room. Evelyn's face went pale, and Harlan stammered, This is fabricated. You can't, but the evidence was ironclad, and one by one, folks started nodding, murmuring support. Mike chimed in from the back. About time someone called it out, Harlan. You've been bullying us all too long. The tide turned fast. Harlan slumped in his chair, defeated, as the board voted to correct the records right then and there. I walked out into the cool Texas night, fines waived, property secured, feeling this rush of vindication like all those prayers hadn't bounced off the ceiling but were stacking up, waiting for the perfect unleash. But here's where it gets deeper, more overwhelming than I could have imagined. The goodness that followed wasn't just about winning a fight. It transformed everything. With the land cleared, I turned that disputed patch into a community garden, inviting everyone over for a planting day. And yeah, even Harlan showed up, awkward at first, but we ended up sharing a beer, him admitting quietly, I got carried away, lost sight of why I started this. It wasn't revenge, it was redemption, for both of us. My freelance work picked up too, turns out. A neighbor I'd impressed at the meeting hooked me up with a steady gig, and suddenly, life wasn't a grind but a flow. Those delays, they weren't punishment, they were protection, stretching me so I could handle the win without letting it go to my head, building character that turned enemies into allies. Looking back, it's like God was whispering, sorry for the wait, kid, but trust Meta's overflow's gonna blow you away. And it did. Peace in my home, stronger faith, even a new romance with Sarah from down the block, who confessed she'd been rooting for me all along. Yet, as satisfying as that wrap-up feels, it leaves me pondering something bigger. Was Harlan the real villain, or just a product of a system that pits neighbors against each other, where power corrupts even the smallest fiefdoms? In communities like ours, these HOA battles expose cracks, jealousy over property, misunderstandings that fester into feuds, and yeah, sometimes a lack of grace on all sides. I walked away changed, more compassionate, but I wonder if I'd snapped earlier, without that divine pause, would it have ended in more hurt? Or was the delay what made justice taste so sweet? It's got me thinking about fairness in our backyards, how we handle conflicts without tearing each other down. What about you? Have you dealt with a neighborhood tyrant or a drawn-out wait that turned out golden? Drop your stories in the comments. Let's chat about what's right, what's wrong, and how we find justice in these messy community tangles. If this hit home, like, subscribe, and share your take. Your voice might just spark the change someone else needs.